Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very, very special episode of Seller Sessions. I am Isabella Hamilton, CEO of Rangbell, beyond many other things. And we have today our wonderful Mr. Danny McMillan. And I am super excited for this episode because me and Danny, we are kind of on the same mindset when it comes to so many different things. And rarely do we ever get to dive deep into what really matters and what is important in today's world and has been important for centuries and centuries, as we get to discover from many books that we all read. So today we will be talking about power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. So Danny, welcome to
Thank
our
you.
show.
Thank you for having us. We've had a discussion about doing some mindset stuff together. And if anyone has not listened to the Boundaries show, it kind of rolls in nicely about setting boundaries. And the saying's true in terms of power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And it can be highly seductive for people. We can take them down the wrong route. They lose the sense of self. And really what I want to do is want to kind of go through this dialogue today. I've made a load of notes. Looking through things is, with this whole thing with power, people, I see it is that let's say you're in your childhood and you were never paid attention to and things like that. So there are people out there who will chase power because their power has been taken away. But what about if we can live in this world whereby you've got strong boundaries, you respect other people's boundaries, but you retain your internal power that benefits other people. So you use whatever your internal power is. Imagine it like a battery. It fills up, right? And when it's drained down, your power goes down, you're going to be tired and all this kind of thing. But what about if we lived in a world where there wasn't a predator-prey aspect to it? What about if everyone was set on an even keel and had a compass to not have to deal with stuff like that? Because people that will look, you see with bullies and that, and I'll get into all that kind of stuff later, but you get into things like bullies only want to go after what they see as prey, right? Because they want low hanging fruit. But what about if you carry yourself in a certain way where people sense, because they get an energy, right? That they're going, well, I won't bother with them because it's going to be too much hard work. So why don't we make it hard work for the bullies and those kind of people in the world by everyone having the set of tools? And I'll weave in some of the stories from my life. I've never done it in depth, but this is probably the closest you're going to get shit out of me. But I think it's really important in the times that we live in. So what I want to do is I want to start with a few books, if I may.
Sure, but first, can I just say,
Yeah.
I think everybody's going to really love this because what connects people most is when you are really true, not only to yourself, but actually showing people that you can be who you really are
Yeah.
and have your own opinion, even though it may not be the same opinion other people hold. So I think this is the perfect time to put out an episode like this because I think a lot of people will really take that into their life and be able to make new decisions based on this information. So I'm very excited to hear about your personal stories because we do know each other for a few years, but rarely do we ever get a chance to go in depth one another and with the community. So I'm super excited. Just wanted to say that.
Excellent. So I want to start with a few books. Now, a lot of people have heard about The Prince, 48 Laws of Power, but less so people will focus on the power paradox and say the art of war. And so you can extrapolate information from these books. They can either be a compass of protection and awareness, or they can be used for bad, right? Depends how you want to read the book. So if we look at, say, The Prince, now I think it might be in the US and stuff, but I'm sure this has been covered in universities and schools, the same as 48 Laws of Power. They use these as reference points, people in corporations and stuff. So, I mean, The Prince is basically an extended analysis on how to acquire and maintain political power. Now, it's more than that, right? But you've got to remember this book was written in, I think it's the 16th century. Machiavelli was from a city in Italy, and they were savage times. And these times are not necessarily what the same times as they reflect today, right? So what we have now is that we live in the safest times which ever been recorded for man or woman. But because we've got all these media outlets on blast, right? And bad news travels quicker than good news and stuff like that. So we're surrounded, whilst in the most people times that's ever existed, you wouldn't look like that. When you turn on the news, it's still like a war zone out there, whether that's political, psychological, or brutality in a physical sense in third world countries and stuff. So we get these, like the Prince, if you bump into the 48 Laws of Power, for instance, we talk about Machiavellianism. And well, Machiavelli is the guy that wrote the Prince, right? And so now you look at, say, Machiavellianism, that's part of the tetrad, or the triad and the tetrad. So with the triad, I can't remember the fourth one of the tetrad, we'll come back to that. But the triad is narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism. So even with that, the book gives you a reference point depending on how you want to read that book, and you absorb that kind of information. And then you've got like 48 Laws of Power, right? Robert Greene. He's done a number of bestsellers, even down to all of these books. And he'll say this himself if you watch the interviews. He writes them books from a point of anger and disdain for hypocrisy. So if you look at something like The Art of Seduction, so The Art of Seduction it will show you over, and it's men and women. There's 9 character traits for those. You've got the rake, which is generally for the guys. And like the siren. So if we look at the original siren was Cleopatra, another example of that would be Marilyn Monroe. Yeah. And so you've got the siren, and there's many others, the natural and everything else. And part of those you can invert to be men and women, apart from the rake and siren. And so you've got all of his books. He's like human nature. He picks up on the sides of human nature on the negative side. And he, as I said, he writes from a place of anger, and he's done the 50th law with 50 Cent, and I'm just part my way through the daily laws or something now, which is a combination of all of those things for 365 of the days of the year. But I think what happens is when you're consuming content, you have to be really careful of not being sucked into a vortex, because you see this where people will read stuff and they're led that way, and it's the only bit, and then they consume, and it, instead of taking it on and going, okay, there's that bit there, we'll use that bit there, I'll use my moral compass up here, this is my empathy, this, do you see where I'm coming from? So you've got these books, and they are in part, like Robert Greene would say to you, this isn't a book for you to go out and do bad. I mean, he's even had emails, it's like, your book's disgusting, my husband read it and he went off like a crazy buffoon. But I think what it is, he's just trying to show you the underbelly of life, to come up with what is going on out there, what happens in the real world. If you've come from a little village and lived under a block, and you've not been exposed to the big lights, one day you're going to get exposed, and you need to be prepared for those kind of things. So you would look at these, the Prince and the 48 Laws of Power would lean on to more of that dominance and angrier side, right?
Right.
And then you've got something like The Power Paradox. Now, I only read that recently. I was blown away by the book. And effectively what he's saying is that how power dynamics affect everyone's aspect of their life, right? And how power can be for a force of good in the world, right? So by this definition, one could be powerful without needing to try and control, coerce, or dominate people. And what it does in there, it gives you a set of data, and it's probably, I think it goes back to, he studied this area of power over like 30 years. So where it's saying is that the people, the audience that download the podcast, tune into us, right? Your audience, if you want to call it influence or whatever, your audience puts you where you are. You don't put you where you are, and they can quickly take that away. Right. So what you've got is, if you've reached a certain level, whatever it may be, it's a privilege. It's not a guarantee, and it can all be gone tomorrow. And so with the Power Paradox, it talks about helping others and putting them on, using your influence to get other people ahead. And then what they do is they're talking about trying from their perception of what they see of that person. Yeah, that's the right person, man or woman. Get them into that position. because I know they're going to help us and help others along the way. But then what happens is people take these crooked paths and get seduced by it. And when they get exposed to it, boom, they come tumbling down what the Jordan Peterson's dominance hierarchy, which I'll get into in a bit about serotonin and stuff. And then you've got some other books as well. So you've got Sun Tzu, right? You've got The Art of War. That's 2,500 years old, right? And I'll read some quotes from it. And so the essence of the difference with Sun Tzu is like, it's not about war and going into battle and confrontation and everything else. Like he says here as a quote, supreme excellence consists of breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. No worry, forgetting bloodshed and drama and all of those things that come with it. So it says, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither your enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. And it's true. If you pick that apart and extrapolate that, it comes down to self-awareness. Do you really want to do this? Does this take you off the game? Do you want to get pulled into all this kind of stuff? Or do you just want to move along in life and just do your thing? And I'm not talking about not bumping into the walls of the universe. You want to make a dent in the universe. You want to make a change, as all entrepreneurs do. You want to feel like you've gone through this life. And when you get, and I mentioned this on the Boundary Show, when you leave this world, the final few conversations are going to take place at your funeral. And they're not going to talk about anything other than your character. They're the last words that you leave the world. You come in kicking and screaming naked. You go out naked, or a sheet over you, at least in the coffin. But you see where I'm coming from. Like we come in, we're a blip, and then we go. What you do with that blip is going to be very, very important. There's another book here as well. This can kind of sound contentious. I'll try not to read it all out so I don't get cancelled. But there's thing about architects, right? If you look at Jungian analysts, like this guy Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette, so they make an argument that, and we're talking about, because we've got this thing with toxic masculinity and all this kind of thing. Now, I think there's 352 different archetypes you invert for women. So it's the king, it's the queen. Do you know what I mean? It inverts. And the idea of it is like, I'll read what it says. These are not my words, by the way, so don't cancel me. It says, make the argument that mature masculinity is not abrasive or domineering, but generative, creative, and empowering of the self and others. Moore and Gillette clearly defined the four mature male archetypes that stand out for a myth and the literature across history. The king, the energy of just and creating of order. The warrior, the energy of aggression but non-violent action. The magician, the energy of intuition and transformation. And the final one is the lover, the energy that connects one to others and the world. And then it talks about the immature side, right? This is where you get into deep narcissism and stuff like that, like the high chair tyrant and the trickster and the hero and stuff. And the idea is, man or woman, depending on where you sit in these archetypes, your goal is always going to be for betterment of as a human being. You want to aim for the king, warrior, magician, lover. Not everyone's going to hit those heights, right? Or you want to be a queen, warrior, magician, lover. Whatever it is, what he's trying to clearly define is to give you a path out, because we've got a lot of situations. You've got single parent families, and you have like these wonderful mothers that bring these kids up and they're fucking working their asses off and everything else. And they sometimes don't have a good man in the family nucleus who's also guiding the child as well. Like, respect women, be polite, open doors, work hard. Do you know what I mean? They're missing some of those elements. And so sometimes, like, you get, like, I call them the lost men, where they go off on a tangent and they succumb for other things, drugs, violence, all these kind of things. But there's no way to pull them back on for betterment. And so something like that can be a really good book. And for people that really have a dark side of nature and stuff like that, there are things like shadow work. And shadow work is like, everyone has a light side and a dark side. But what happens is people will put on this mask and they haven't integrated the shadow. The shadow could be anger, envy, and all these kind of things. And the idea is if you do shadow work, which is the hardest thing that you ever do in your life, is that you want to integrate your dark and light sides to become complete rather than because at the moment they're individuated, right? So you got the shadow, you got this. Here's the mask. You wear the mask. These are all these baggage in the background. Resolve your trauma. Bring those in. Make yourself as a complete kind of person. So there's a really interesting book there. And as I said, for the extrapolation for females as well, you can go and look at the different variants for females as well. I think there's in total, as I said, 352 of them, right? So there's some ideas of like, when you look and read something, is like, do you want to go down that route of 48 laws of power and the prince and use it in a bad way? Or is that your defense manual? So you know if that's coming towards you, how to deflect that and not get involved in that kind of stuff. And reading the power paradox is effectively, what can you do to help others? What little influence do you have? Can you put other people on? Can you make their lives a difference? And that in itself is extremely rewarding, you know? And it's...
I think I mean, you unpacked a lot. So I think it's worth going back to the beginning, because let's say for somebody that's living on remote island that have never heard of these laws, or really any help, they've never got any mindset help to achieve higher success, and then they come across this new information, right? Like the 48 laws of power, or the seduction book, and all of these. So it's a matter of like, okay, you're starting from a clean slate, and now there's two ways where you can go, which is what I'm hearing from you. You can become a good person and still use that influence for the greater good, or you can become so hungry and so deep inside yourself, and maybe with anger of all the trauma you experience in your life, and you're going that route. But it goes back to same thing like with money. They say, oh, money is the root of all evil. For me, the way I see money is, it will only make you more of who you are right now. So a tool like this, such as all these amazing books that, most entrepreneurs read because we're so hungry for knowledge, is what you do with it that will set you apart. So it all goes down to each individual person. You can still reach success, because I think a lot of people, they think, okay, if I use this and I will be like an angry leader, everybody's going to follow me because of fear. So
that's the prince.
Exactly. The question is, do you want to be feared, or do you want to be loved? And a lot of
respected.
Exactly. A lot of people will think, well, if I lead with fear, then everybody's going to follow me and they will all do what I say, and I will reach maximum success. Whereas on the other side, if you lead with love and you still use these powers that you have, but you can attract those who are more likely to be like you. And in my opinion, I think you can get more success by being a loving human than by being a feared human. What do you think?
I totally agree. And that's the thing, is that people can lead and they'll follow you for a period through fear, but they won't respect you because it's fear. People want you to lead and they want to go, I want to follow your lead in what you do because I believe in what you're doing and I see how you treat people around you, right? Now, that can be a terrible tactic in the corporate world, which I'll get to in a moment, because we're going to talk about the power dynamics. They're everywhere, right? Everywhere you look in life, there are a level of power dynamics going on somewhere. Politics, right? The movie business. I don't even have to name names. We've seen with the casting couch, how women get treated, how they've kept quiet, and then suddenly the monster, or I won't name his name, but then gets arrested, and it all comes out. And there's dozens of these women that have been treated that way because he run that industry on fear and his power. And what happened? Eventually, all of that shit, there's no such thing as a free lunch. You never get away with anything. Eventually, it comes up to catch you. And in that case, that person got caught. Same with the music industry. You've only got to look at the corporate environment. That is like, I don't know, give me drug dealers and a villain, at least I know where I stand, because they'll tell you where you stand. But in the corporate world, they're the worst offenders just because they've got a suit on. Not all people. I'm just saying there's certain areas. And if you, I haven't got the study in front of me, but I think 5% of the top 500 FTSE 500 are confirmed psychopath. High functioning psychopaths that work 80 hours a week will be able to make ruthless decisions because they don't have fear, because they have a lack of empathy. So people will run these organizations, but eventually it capitulates, right? It can't run forever because you burn everyone out. Like narcissistic managers will burn out the team underneath. The manager might perform well for a few years, but then when the team leaves in droves, in the end, they have to say, listen, man or woman, it's enough. You're just scaring everyone off. You've lost productivity. So there's certain things that can work well for these people. You know, like they talk about a peacetime CEO and a wartime CEO. There are a time and a place for those elements, not narcissism, but being that you've got to be strong and we've got to nose to the grind. But when it's peaceful, it's peaceful. You got through that battle. Do you know what I mean? But I think people then get lost. And I think you never see things lost. It always implodes when Machiavellianism or something, someone will always get caught in the end. And I think, and that's the thing, because just because you stick a suit on,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, some of these books that you mentioned, I think I read somewhere that they're banned in prison. And it made me think, like, do people actually use these techniques? Because, like you said, a lot of people consume a lot of content, but do they actually use them? And now the question is, like, the ones that use them are maybe the ones that are just so power hungry that they actually follow those rules. And those who are like on the nice side, they just read the book and they're like, oh, that was a good book, that was nice, and then they move on to something else, and they're not really practicing any of these techniques. Maybe this is where we see the imbalance in so much corruption, because some of the people that want to use these laws of power, right, actually use them, whereas the people who are being good and loving and kind, they're not really that interested in manipulating.
Well, you mentioned the prison system. I think the original term psychopathy actually came from American prison system because it's full of them. It's like the ones that obviously got caught. That in prison, people literally, it's a predator and prey. You see it on the TV, and it's overplayed. But some of the most dangerous people are in prison. A lot of them, murderers and stuff, they psychopathic, and so like it's very hard to defend against that kind of thing. And this is why people change. Like, they'll go into prison and they'll come out and they're never the same again, because they may have gone in for not a parking ticket, but something they've done that's stupid. Maybe let's just say it's drink driving. It's a one-off thing. Someone got really hurt or passed away. They get 2 or 3 years in prison. That will change their life because they're now the prey. They're in prison, and it's like it's a dog eat world, and that's female prisons and male prisons as well. And so being around that kind of thing can obviously turn people into different things because you've got the influence of others around you. The thing with, like, we look at kids that go into gangs on council estates, or you call them in the projects or the slums, wherever in Brazil. Like, these people are like, their family become the gang. They become indoctrinated with that because that's the only way they get protected. They get indoctrinated into this environment. And then from the age of 12, 13, because they can't be arrested, they're selling drugs and all these kind of things. And it's not a life. And it's something that happens every day. And we're very lucky that we, as people, where we were born, not so much me, because I come from not like that level, but kind of a background, and I got out. But I've seen it when people don't, and it changes people, and that's who they turn into. But if you take them out of that environment, 2-3 years, put them around good people, they can also change then, as long as they're not a psychopath or a narcissist or whatever, because there's no obviously cure for it. But it's that kind of thing. This is why we say, like, when people talk about you're the average of the 5 people you most spend time with, you need to be very careful of the 5 people you hang around with. It don't matter if they're successful. If they're all assholes, you're going to be arsehole number 6. If you're a good person, you're going to be good person number 6 out of them. Do you see where I'm coming from? So you still need to pick and choose of where you go and your moral compass, and we'll get into all those things.
One question. Would you
Yes.
say that the negative qualities is what sums up the group, or is it the good qualities? Because let's say you do have like 5 asshole friends, right? But you're the good one. Is your power of goodness not enough to influence the rest of 5? And how would that compare to?
Well, this is, we'll get into the dominance hierarchy and all those kind of things, and lobsters in a bucket. Now, if you've seen it in a business, let's say it's a startup business. Let's just say there's 5 people in the business, and there's one who just a wrecking ball running around. That is enough to influence the others to upheaval everyone else, because sometimes good will not always overwin bad. So whilst they might be good people that won't get corrupted to the 4 to the 5th, you still got that level of disruption, and whether the good people show teeth and say we're not going to tolerate that, which goes back to holding down your own power without impeding on others. Yeah. So you could have a good influence on people. We'll talk about those influences in a bit, but you see that one person, we know they say one too many cooks spoil the broth, or only one bad apple upsets the cart.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of truth in that, and it really comes down to the boundaries and the people on what we deem as the good side, as how that gets carried off. You know, if you've got a strong leader that doesn't tolerate that, what is that strong leader, he or she, going to do? They're going to get rid of the bad apple. They're going to have the strength and the purpose to say, this is unacceptable. You're fucking up the vibe in this team here. I've got an unproductive team. You got to go. But then that comes with a set of problems as well. So it's about coming from a point of strength and what you feel is doing the right thing. So what Jordan Peterson talks about, I'll read it word for word. He says, the dominance hierarchy is an evolutionarily based structure where the most competent and powerful people in the given domain claim the top positions. There are many different dominance hierarchies to climb, and each differs with regard to the value. So a dominance hierarchy could be walking into the boxing gym, who's the best boxer. The one could be in an industry with industry leaders. The one could be a group of women, and the one of the women is going to be more powerful than the other. You can generally see that where women's feet will be pointing to the most prominent figure, right? So there's all these micro and mini power adjustments that go on. You don't mean you have to get involved, but it's being aware, right? What's really interesting in this, and he uses this because Peterson's using an example from like lobsters, which humans share a common evolutionary ancestor with. Peterson argues that, like humans, lobsters exist in hierarchies and have a nervous system attuned to status, which runs on serotonin, a brain chemical that is associated with feelings of happiness. Up the hierarchy a lobster climbs, this brain mechanism helps make more serotonin available. The more defeat it suffers, the more restricted the serotonin supply. Lower serotonin, in turn, is associated with more negative emotions. So it goes back predator to prey, being bullied at school, being in the top group, you know, like in school, everyone has them. It's like you've got the chads or the football players, the jocks, or whatever you want to call them in America, right? And then you've got the pretty women over this side, and then you've got like the next down cool crew, and then you've got the nerds, and it's everywhere. Do you know what I mean? And no one wants to be at the bottom of this. But what if we can help create a structure in life where no one needs to be resting at the bottom? If you have self-empowerment and hold yourself down, you won't have to think about being in those power structures, because no one wants to come last in the egg and spoon race like I did when I was a kid, holding it on the spoon, make sure I get to the end. But it's the thing is that we do live in a world which can be quite binary in business. If you don't make money, you're out of business. If you make money, you stay in business. It's that binary. I mean, there's all the stuff that goes on in between. But how do we get to people that they can get over their self-doubt and not come above their stations and help others in positions where they're not as powerful as they could be, or they need a leg up? The difference, Isabella, you can make, you go out to an event and you take a girl by the hand and go, I'm putting you in this room, this room, this room. That can change their life. like that.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah. Doesn't take much. Now, if you're power hungry and you keep it all to yourself, right? Well, I'm not going to get that because they might get that gig, and I could do with one of that mental thinking. It's like what you got to do is that you got to try and help people be better than you. Give them your knowledge. It's the same with the podcast. A lot of people in the industry, once COVID kicked in and everything else, I had half a dozen people come in to me setting up. I spent 90 minutes explaining everything to the detail, how we managed to get seller sessions to where we got. Nothing was off the table. I was absolutely open. I'm like, this is what you need to do, or this is what I did, grinding for year after year after year, and it kicks in at year 3, and I explained everything in graphic detail. Nothing was off the table because I don't care. Like, if anything, it's going to make me better. If I've got to think about lunch with Norm, he ain't fucking giving up. He's like a machine. He's out there, right? So what does that do? That means I got to stay on my game. You got to stay on your game. Sharon's got to stay on their game. It's healthy. It keeps things bubbling, and there should be alternative voices in the space for people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I like what you said about, being able to help everyone. And the thing is, not everybody thinks the same. If we did, then we would live in a utopia world, which might end up being a super boring world. I'm not saying that, this classes of people should exist, but if you really think about the other side of it, it's one side that makes the other side work. Let's say if everybody's helpful and everybody makes the same amount of money, it would be almost impossible. Now there's this opportunity for those of us who actually want to help to be out there and put out content, just like you said with Norm. Like, he's definitely
a machine. He's gone past 100. Lee Rand's just clipped past the 100.
I
all
love
these
that.
people.
So it's up to us to to show people how it can be done, one, and two, just the power of being yourself. Because what I noticed a lot, just being in this business for the longest I've ever been in any specific niche, close to 8 years soon, what I notice is that a lot of people are fearful of who they truly are. So when I say this, I mean, oh, if so and so found out who I really am, they wouldn't have me on their podcast, or they wouldn't like me for who I am. And I want to tell those people that that is not true. So for me, being who I am, and being outspoken and being loud and being crazy at parties and doing all this, they can't possibly see how I can do that and also run a successful business. And my thing is, I don't ever want to be somebody else. Like, I'm not going to go at a party and act like I'm a saint and an angel when I know I just want to be wild and dance and have a good time. Doesn't matter how people are going to see me for, because those who are going to like me, they're going to like me for exactly who I am. And those are the people that I want to be around. So I notice a lot in this business that some people put on this face of, I am this kind of person. So what happens in that case, Danny, they attract people who are attracted to that kind of personality, which they end up hating anyway, because it's not their tribe. And then the worst part of all of this is that they lose their identity. There will come a point where they actually don't know who they are. Am I this person or this person? Because they've been battling it with it for so long. And if I could just give one word of advice, is like, just be who you are, and those who will love you no matter what.
And just to add there as well, here's, because the bit I want to talk about, we're fishes in a small pond, and I'll go into stuff and my mindset on things. And the difference between you and maybe some others, not all, but others, is that you can go out and you'll party all night, right? But 8 o'clock, the face is on, click, Monday morning, you're live on that podcast, and no one would know any difference because you're a professional. So the bit I want to get to here is like, to use the Amazon community as an example, and I'll go back to my music career as well, right? So in my mind, the way I see it, we are fishes in a small pond, and you can't go in and buying into your own hype, right? Because what got you here won't get you there, and it can be very, very distracting. And I've said this to a couple of people before, I won't name names, but I said, look, if you believe that being a podcaster, host, or anything becomes part of your identity, when the lights go up and the music goes off and the people disappear, what you got left? You can't bury your identity into that. Yeah. And it's the same thing every other week. Someone called me a legend. I'm 46 years old in a couple of weeks. I'm not dead. And I've been in the Amazon game 7 years. I'm not a legend. And when people go self-proclaimed kings, queens, godfathers, fairy godmothers, we're none of that. What we are service providers, and we're sellers, and we shit just like everyone else.
Oh,
And
speaking of that, I was called a duchess the other day. That was
there you
new.
go.
That was
Yeah.
new.
Yeah. But was it a backhanded compliment, or was it do you know what I mean?
No,
It's like
it was a nice compliment. It's just the one that
yeah.
I've never had before.
I've been called a micro celeb. I've been called a guru, which makes my skin crawl. But this whole thing is very, very fickle. And again, it goes back to it's consistency, hard work, and then you've got to change and evolve in what you do. I'll give you a quick example. Whereas it wasn't I got above my stations, it was just a hard crash for me back in the music industry. I had a major label deal where I had a licensed label deal. They would fund it, and I'll put out artists out on the label. At the same time, I had a Kiss show. This is 2001. And what happened was I lost my label deal. And when I lost my label deal, I lost my Kiss show. Then we had LimeWire and everything else. You had the 2001. At that point, I'd done 18 tours of America. Every couple of weeks, I was out doing 3 or 4 gigs, coming back like mini tours and stuff. And I remember my very last tour of America, I played in LA. I can't remember the Giant, I think it was. It might have been Giant, or it might be San Francisco. I can't remember. 2,000 people queuing up dub plates, my own records, crowds going off. Get home, get off that plane. That was my very last tour. The next thing I was doing was working at Ford Motor Co. under a trailer, fixing lorries in the pissing down rain. And what that does, it's like, how the fuck were you up there rocking crowds getting paid a few grand a gig to then next thing you'll know, you're under trailers at Ford's? It just kind of capitulated in that period. And that's what I mean by the fickleness of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this
I
is
think
why
a lot of people tend to, you're right, hold that identity like, this is who I am. I'm invincible. Nothing can ever happen to me. And entrepreneurs see that more often than not. Like they'll go through stages and they're on top of the world, and next thing you know, they're down. And then they keep doing this waves. And I actually enjoy that process because I adopted this mentality that I either win or I learn. But of course, not everybody can think that, which is where self-development work comes in. You know, like for you, it must have been earth-shattering, but yet you still built upon that, and you took the skills that you had, and even though you had to go through this like muddy waters for a while, you were able to build from that. And now that experience has added to who you really are right now. Not only that you can share this experience now with the world and, you know, the thousands and thousands of followers that are listening to your podcast, but it's for you as well, and for your kids and for your friends. Like you're able to say, hey, I was here, I was the king of the world, and then I was working in dark at night, suffering freezing cold, and then you went back up. And you know there's absolutely nothing that could ever happen to you right now that you couldn't get out of, all because of those experiences.
Yeah, because the thing, it comes back to not tying in your identity, that's something that's so fickle, and it's not real, right? So look at it like we've been doing the podcast 3 years, grinded all the way, kind of took off. Like I'm only good as the last podcast I do. Like I've now got sold out events. If I don't sell out the next one, I've got that burden of performance now. It's like you've fallen off, or someone's sick of hearing my East London accent and like done with that. Someone comes along, does a grand job, they're focused, they're head down. Do you know what I mean? And this is why you can't ever take your eye off the ball. And it's like you might see people on flyers and events and stuff, but there's tremendous work that goes behind everything that you do. And you know that tomorrow it could all be gone. So what you do is you don't tie it into your identity. You just see, okay, you're on a mini wave. And this is what I go back to. It's like, I'm not fucking Drake and you're not Rihanna, right? We're in the Amazon community. Let's just fucking get real for one moment. Service providers, sellers. We provide a service. That's it. We're shit the same as everyone else. And so you can't get into that, you know, grandiose nonsense, because that is your downfall. That will almost guarantee, if you're looking to get to a certain level and continue on the path that you want to do, and I want to be here for 10 years. The only way I'm going to be here for 10 years is I have to add this burden performance and pay that fucking rent every day. Because success is only rented, it's never owned. And there's always someone ready to step in, more humble than you and all that to do that. And so you always have to have that. But I think when you've been on the merry-go-round a few times and you're a kid and you learn this shit, and as you get older, you're like, we're not going to be doing that again. We're not going to be making that mistake. So it does come wiser. But this is why I'll speak to some people in the space. They might be out partying all the time. And I have a little quiet word in their shell. And I'm like, listen, it's all good. You can do your partying, you can do all this shit. But you've got to do the work. You got here because of the work. This little bit of micro celebrity nonsense will not carry you if you do not fucking deliver. The burden of performance is every day. So
some people get lost in that. I can see how that happens, especially for somebody that's never had that level of success. And I saw some examples this year, and again, just like you, I'm not going to name names, and I don't judge. I just like to observe. I'm more of an observing type of person, but I see it's like, they started here and then they gain a little bit of traction and success, and then they kind of get lost into that identity where it's like, I am this powerful person now, and everybody like lower their heads to me. And I've never done that, one, because it's not my thing. Like, I'd rather be the person behind the scene. But what happens with these people, the faster they go up, the faster they come down, because you have to really understand who you are. Like, everybody can get hit by luck, right? We can all win the lottery. And then this is where a lot of these people who win the lottery lose it, because they get into the mentality of like, oh, now I am so wealthy that doesn't matter how much money I spend, I will always have money. So I feel like that translates into this like guru or mini celeb authority that they think they have. And then next thing you know, they're gone. So my advice on that would be, just start building and keep grinding, and still be a good person, because it all comes down to that. When I decided to come out with Rank Bell, because for the longest time I was just this person, didn't even have like a profile picture, but I made that conscious decision that, I will come out to the world, I will share what I know and my expertise, but yet I don't want to become that person that's super hungry and wants this like celeb life. And, a lot of people say, you are like a little, like you call it, I think, like a mini celebrity or this. And I'm like,
micro celeb. I mean, that's got to be a backhanded compliment as well. If we're talking micro, we're talking tadpole. We're not even talking fish in a pond.
But I had to think for myself. I was like, I wonder when did I become that? Like, because the last the Prosper show that we went to, and well, you didn't make it, but a lot of people came to me and they're like, wow, I see you on the podcast, I hear you here and there, wow, you are like so famous now, like, and I had to really take a moment. I was like, how the hell did this happen? Because that was never my intention. And that's just to show that when you don't focus on that, you just focus on being yourself and offer as much help as you possibly can, you will also get to that level, whether you want it or not. Like, you will never see me go into Facebook groups and type all these comments. And I see how people get really tied into their Amazon identity, which is another thing that we should talk at some point. It's like Amazon is their whole life. For me, as much as I love Amazon and it's a great money maker for me, I tell people that's my side gig. Like, I never want to lose myself to that. That is just something that makes me money. I mean, there's passionate subjects that people gather around, but like, I see people type in every single day, and then they put in their emotion and their anger and their suppression, and now they're happy that this company is going bankrupt, or they're they take advantage of that opportunity to pump themselves up. Like, these are things that I don't like,
well, that's the divide and conquer. It's like it's a kind of virtual signal, right? They've done that, but I do this over here, so I'll shit on that. And like each week I mentioned on the podcast, I know this is a pre-record, by the way, everyone, it is a pre-record. We did a podcast the other day, and I look through the last few weeks, and I'm like, 2 weeks ago, we had rebates get the shit kicked out of them. Then A week later, someone else's terms, like the aggregators, and I mentioned now that we've got the Explorer tools come out, it's now Helium's 10 and all the other software companies that use an algorithm to guess search volume. It's their turn to get the shit kicked out of them, and then it'll be someone else's turn next week. It's like, calm the fuck down. Do you know what I mean? And it does, it passes through. No, it's the same with rumors. I mean,
I just want to say one thing about that, and I wasn't gonna, mention that. It's just what I don't like, because I know I always say I love that, I love that, I love that. What I don't love is when people take advantage of a terrible situation like that for their own gain. So, if you really think about it, this rebate company that has had issues in the recent events, I should be the first one to be happy. Danny, I can tell you right now in front of all your listeners and all our listeners, I was very sad for what happened. I didn't go and post and say, oh my God, this is what happened. Everybody comes to Rank Bell, even though I would probably benefit the most from something like this happen. And for me, it was like my empathy side came out, and I said, wow, one thing I would never want that happen to me. What is that I can do to maybe help if there's any way I can do that? And we are all a family. If you think about it, like, it seems like it's a lot of us, but really it's not.
It's not that big. Like, we're in a bubble. And although a lot of people are making really good money and stuff, it is still a bubble. It's not as big as what people think it is in terms of
this is our people. This is our family, Danny. Like, this is our family. And we need to support each other, because it's us against the world. It's not us against us. And this is what I don't love. I don't love when people take advantage of the fact that somebody else went down or that they're losing. And I know a lot of people do that because they want to feel better about themselves. Like, oh, I can do something better. Or, if there's something bad happened to them, now it puts me in the position of gaining more. Like, that's messed up. I do not love that.
Well, there's a saying for the music industry: be careful you kick on the way up, because you don't know who you're going to meet on the way down. And this is why I always make a point to say whatever I do is behind closed doors. I say my door's open, we'll chop it up privately and deal with that way. Because I think when you do, if you've got a platform, you have responsibility as well. And yeah, you can play the divide and conquer, and that's fine. People can do what they want. But I learned a big lesson, again, going back to the music industry. We were, it's about 99, 2000, just been on tour, finished up the Winter Music Conference down in Miami. It always takes on around spring break. I was going there from 97 to 2002 every year. You're partying, the industry's out, and you do industry parties, you do your DJ gigs and stuff like that. And there's a really powerful, I wasn't on the agency, but there's a really powerful agent in the UK. And I was invited at the table. It had the head of Creamfields, the big promoters from the UK. Like, you've got Ultra over in Miami. Think Ultra. Imagine getting Ultra and all the dance music, kingpins, queens, whatever, and they're all sitting at this table. Now, this guy is charlied off his head. He's got a girl sitting on each lap, and he said to me, I guess you want to be on my agency. And I said his name, and I said, because he ignored it at first. He was on and on and on. In the end, I said, listen, I won't piss on you if you was on fire, right in front of everyone in the industry. Bad move. Whilst I felt good in that very moment, and the shock horrors on everyone's face because of this bully, that literally got me shut out, because this guy had a lock on all the DJs playing at all the big clubs. And they're like, he would plant a group of DJs, because when they're more powerful, what they do is they go, well, if you want such and such and such are the big names at that time, you must take so-and-so and so-and-so. So I got squeezed off of lineups, and I still didn't learn my lesson, because I went to Miami the following year. He come up to me and he offered me a beer. And I said, what did I tell you last year? I won't piss on you if you're on fire. Now, fuck off. Stupid, Danny, idiot.
Would you change any of that now? If you had
Why do you think I say I talk to everyone behind closed doors? What did I gain out of that? Nothing. Stupidity. Do you know what I could have done? I could have got the same result by fronting the bully, but did it in private without embarrassing in front of the industry. He actually cleaned up his act, because he was always walking around off his nut, but he was always a good worker. He'd be on his phone organising people's gigs, but totally off his tits all the time. But he was a pig. He was horrible to people, and he was a bully. But what I should have done was left it that night, picked up the phone, and I would have I could have chewed him out privately when no one was around, and I wouldn't have got shut out. That is where you play the power game and you get burnt. I wasn't trying to play the power game. I was defending myself, but I did it in front of powerful people, and that fucked me.
Yeah.
So you learn.
And then you did it again in Miami.
Stupid fucking idiot. Yeah. Went that the next year, right? Yeah. Like talk
You're like,
about
I still remember you from last year. My answer is still no.
Yeah. So yeah, that was a kibosh on my UK DJ. I had to fucking spend the rest of the time DJing abroad. Not that it's a bad thing, but you got to help yourself, right? Sometimes there's a time and a place to do everything, and that wasn't the time to do shit like that. That was stupidity on my part.
Right, but those actions have led you to becoming a micro celeb.
Anyway, but you know what I'm saying is this is the problem, is once you start going down that route and you start playing those games.
We all make mistakes. I'm sure I've made plenty, like even in the past 2 years, and I never regret anything I do, because again, I either win or I learn. But there's like few little things I'm like, man, if only my ego or my pride didn't.
It's pride
at that time.
It's your pride and your ego fucking with you.
And it's such a small, minuscule amount, but it has evolved into such a big thing. And I couldn't see that picture. I thought it was just like a thing right then and there, and it would be and it would be done. But just seeing how that spread out across, the past year or two, I'm like, fuck, that was a bad move.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be here in this.
No, but this is the thing you need to learn. Like, the best way to learn? Other people's mistakes.
Absolutely.
Watch their mistakes, go, yeah, I won't put my hand in the fire just yet. Just don't